Okay, good morning, everyone. I want to start by welcoming everyone to this press conference this morning to talk about how important nurses are to our healthcare system. But I have to start with the most important piece, which is a land acknowledgement. We are situated here today on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the First Nations of the Credit in lands that are covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, and we recognize and acknowledge the history of these lands because we know that these communities have protected and taken care of these lands literally for tens of thousands of years, and we have an obligation to work with them going forward to continue to do that work. I'm very proud to be standing here with Cathryn Hoy, who is the president of the Ontario Nurses Association and a registered nurse, as well as a number of other nurses, to talk about the fact that we can fix our healthcare system. Together, we can make sure that our nurses are respected, that they have the ability to do their jobs the way that they want to do. We can end the burnout, we can stop the cuts and fix healthcare for all of us. I want to say that I am very grateful for the work that nurses do all the time, but as we all know, they really have stepped up over the course of the pandemic, and they held our healthcare system together on so many fronts and in so many settings. And I want nurses to know that an NDP government will respect the work that you're doing and acknowledge you as key partners in fixing what has been broken for far too long in our healthcare system. And that includes scrapping Bill 124. And that also includes making sure we hire 30,000 more nurses and that we create positions for late career nurses to help with mentorship, to help with training, so that we can get the nurses that we need on the job. Nurses deserve no less than being able to provide that quality care that they know that patients deserve and need. They have not been able to do that in the way that they want because of the cuts that we've seen to our healthcare system. Everybody should be able to feel that the minute they go into an emergency ward, that they're able to get the attention that they need right away, and that they're not left lingering in a chair in a waiting room or on a gurney in a hallway. And it's nurses that provide that quality care the minute you walk into an emergency ward. Everybody knows that when you're in the hospital, if you bring a loved one, a child, for example, into a hospital, it's the nurses that are there to calm you, to give you information, to provide you with support, and then, of course, with quality health care for your entire time that you're in a hospital. But, of course, we know nurses have roles in all kinds of our healthcare settings, whether it's long-term care, community care. We know that nurses work very, very hard. So I want to just reflect on the fact that we've seen over a number of years nurses getting a raw deal from governments. We know that the Liberals, when they were in office, they fired 1,600 nurses, and they never came forward with the kind of solutions that we needed back then to ensure that nurses were on the job, that we had the ratio of full-time nurses that we've been told for years and years we needed to provide the quality health care that people deserve in this province. And of course, now we have a Ford government that cuts and cuts and cuts. Conservatives always cut. We can stop that. We can stop the cuts. We can stop conservative privatization of our healthcare system. And I'm asking all of you to join me in supporting our nurses, supporting our healthcare system, and using this election to make the difference. Together we can fix healthcare. Together we can do this. In order to do it, though, you need to vote NDP on Thursday. I'm going to ask Cathryn Hoy to say a few words because she knows better than anyone what nurses have been going through, what they've been dealing with during the couple of years we've had with the pandemic. She can provide some of that insight and some of the solutions that she knows will help us fix our healthcare system. Nurses are the backbone. They're the backbone and the lifeblood of our healthcare system. But she's also a registered nurse herself. and she's the leader of the Ontario Nurses Association, as I mentioned off the hop. And that means that she has been fighting for many, many years now, as president and prior on the executive, for us, for her members, for the nurses that are members of the Ontario Nurses Association, absolutely, but also for us, for our healthcare system, because nurses know better than anyone what's necessary to fix it and ensure that people get the quality care that they need. So without further ado, I want to say, first of all, how proud I am to be standing with Cathryn and the team of nurses that are here this morning, but also to invite Cathryn to say a few words. Cathryn?
Thank you, everyone. I don't know, you're a little bit shorter than me, so can you hear me? Okay, all right, great. So I am Cathryn Hoy. I am a registered nurse, and I am the provincial president for the Ontario Nurses Association. And thank you so much, and thank you for all of you that have shown up from the press and the media, because Andrea said this right. We are here for you. That is our primary focus right now, is for public health care. And it's a very clear message that we're here to share with you today, and we have been trying to share this message for a long time, because I'll be blunt, that's who I am. We are in serious trouble. Our healthcare is in extremely serious trouble. The government over the last 4 years has put our public healthcare system to the brink of collapse. I like to say we are our own critical care unit here in Ontario. And what it's doing is it's hurting Ontarians. I'm talking about you. I'm not talking about us right now. I don't think the general public knows what's going on in hospitals right now. They really don't. So chemotherapy is meant to be life-saving. That's the purpose of chemo. We have Ontarians that are not getting their chemo treatment because there's no nurse. It's not as simple as hooking up an IV. Patients on certain chemos need to have a nurse with them constantly to do vital signs and to make sure that they're safe. There are no nurses to do this. So cancer, you're going on an uphill battle, and the chemo is supposed to plateau you, and the chemo is supposed to give you life. But without that chemo, you are slipping down that hill really fast. And that, Ontarians, is the true reality of what is going on. How about a small rural hospital? You have one nurse, and you have an accident come in and a vital signs absent. Who is going to live and who is going to die? That is the truth, Ontarians. And how about when you're in a large community and you call an ambulance because your loved one is having a heart attack and they're not there? Why? There's no nurses in the ER, so the ambulances are backed up because they cannot offload their patients. You need to realize that this is the true reality. And to be honest, I've been begging over the last few weeks to get this message out. This is about health care. The shortage is getting far worse. The nurses are burnt out. They're leaving. They're retiring. Our young grads, which is important because they are our future for tomorrow in healthcare, they're going back to school, and they're going into different fields. So we're losing from both ends, and that is terrible. We have no one for the grads, the new learners that are staying. They don't have the staff there to build them in where they should be in their skill and ability and knowledge. We are the most expensive line item on the province, but there's a reason. But there's room for everybody in healthcare, all levels, PSWs, RPNs, RNs. And we forget a lot, this is about nurses, but we have a whole slew of other healthcare professionals that are suffering also in the system that we have now. So Ontarians, I am begging you. I am honestly begging you as a registered nurse, and for the people that are here, vote for healthcare. Vote for public healthcare, because a dual system will not work. There will be winners and there will be losers. But your paycheck should never, ever, ever determine what level of care you get. Ontarians and Canadians, we have never been about that. And it's fine to say we're going to throw money at problems. We need 30,000 nurses. There isn't 30,000 nurses. We need a government that is going to work with us so that we can help them rebuild nursing care. That's what we need. It's not going to happen overnight, but we need a government that's going to work with us on that. And we can do it. We have plans. Bill 124, yes, I've said it repeatedly. It targeted a female-dominated profession. I don't know how anyone can look their wives, their daughters, their granddaughters in the eye and think that that is acceptable to target a profession. The pandemic has brought it to the nurses to the breaking point. Nurses are used to death. They absolutely are, but not the deaths that they've seen over the past 2.5 years. It's been horrific. It's not one death or two deaths. It's been many deaths. And look at our long-term care, the privatization of it. That's just wrong too. We're all going to need long-term care at the end of the day. We had, I think it was 6,000 seniors die over the pandemic. That's wrong. And a lot of them died alone. I had mom in long-term care, and I remember watching a family talk to their loved one over an iPad. That's wrong. That is wrong. So without public health care, there's going to be long waiting lists. People are going to suffer. Our tax dollars should go to health care, and we should want to support each other. So thank you very much. And I always go back to the old shampoo commercial. You tell two friends and they'll tell two friends. Maybe some of you are too young for that, but you got to tell your two friends. Vote for public health care. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cathryn. And you're right. Everybody needs to tell two friends, and together we can do it. Together we can fix our healthcare system. Together we can make sure that we have the nurses on the front lines. We can end the burnout. We can make sure that they're providing the care that all of us need in every part of our healthcare system. And we have a job to do, all of us. And that is to stop the cuts, to stop the privatization. And the way to do that is to get out and vote on Thursday, vote NDP, and we will fix what's broken in our healthcare system, and we will work respectfully and in partnership with the Ontario Nurses Association and others that she's described, other people who are providing frontline healthcare services to us in a way that rebuilds our healthcare system. We can do this. We can do it together. Let's make it happen on Thursday. Thanks, everyone. I'll take any questions that folks may have, and once again want to thank Cathryn Hoy and all of the nurses that are behind us, and all of the nurses and other healthcare workers on the front lines of the healthcare system in our province.
So we'll move to on-site questions first. We'll just ask folks to line up at the microphone. First question comes from Megan Fitzpatrick from CBC.
Hi, Ms. Horwath.
Hi, Megan.
Mr. Del Duca just had a news conference saying the Liberals are the only way to stop Doug Ford. He had it on his podium, stop Ford, vote Liberal. He seems to be stealing your campaign slogan that you've been using from the beginning of the campaign, that the NDP are the only way to stop Doug Ford. You're both telling voters the same thing. Can you comment on Mr. Del Duca's? It seems to be a sharp, definitive campaign slogan for him now that the Liberals are the only way to stop Doug Ford. So what's your response to him?
Well, I would say on the contrary, it's the NDP that has momentum right now. It's the NDP who has been talking about healthcare for this entire campaign and connecting with healthcare workers. But most importantly, people remember that with 15 years of the Liberals, they broke the healthcare system. They cut hospital, they fired nurses, they cut hospital budgets, they squeezed those budgets, they didn't allow increases to occur, and that led to cuts, and that led to hallway medicine. So the hallway medicine that existed even before Doug Ford started his cuts came to us because of the Liberal cuts when they were in office. They had 15 years, and instead of strengthening our public health care system, they brought more privatization, particularly in long-term care and home care, and they also brought us hallway medicine. So how can you trust the very people that broke our healthcare system to be the ones to fix it? I think Ontarians understand that very, very clearly. What I will say, though, is that we have never stopped fighting for public health care, and we never will stop fighting. And we will protect our public health care system and strengthen it before elections, and we will talk about that during elections and after elections on Thursday. If you give us the chance, we can be trusted to fix what the Liberals broke and what the Conservatives continue to make worse.
Just as a follow-up, you and Mr. Ford are both visiting Ottawa West Nepean today. Why are you going there, and what do you make of Mr. Ford's visit there today?
We're going there to support our fantastic candidates, particularly Chandra Pasma. We're going to be spending some time with her. Ottawans know that Doug Ford has been AWOL, whether it's the fact that there are people that are still without electricity after the storm, whether it was the way he dragged his feet and didn't step up to the plate during the occupation of Ottawa with the convoys. Doug Ford hasn't been there for Ottawans, and I think the people of Ottawa know that very clearly. So we're excited to go there to support our candidates and to let Ottawans know that we can provide the kind of voice, the kind of government, the kind of representation that you've long deserved but haven't seen with the Conservative members that you have there.
Next question comes from Charlie Pinkerton from Queen's Park Briefing.
Good morning, Andrea and Cathryn and everyone else. I'm actually hoping that both of you can address this question. Last week, I was at a couple of Doug Ford's rallies. There was groups of nurses at both of them protesting. Nurses protested Ford at the debate. In London over the weekend, at least one of the protesters who interrupted Ford's speech at his rally there worked in healthcare. I just want to know from each of you, what is your message to these healthcare workers and protesters more generally about if they should be, doing this, interrupting events? Is it appropriate?
Well, I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Cathryn. It absolutely is appropriate. We have a vibrant democracy and everybody's voice counts, and everybody should have a chance to express their concerns as well as their solutions. And so the minute we stop allowing that kind of public discourse, that kind of protest, we're heading down a very, very slippery slope of authoritarianism, and that is not who we are in a vibrant democracy here in Ontario and here in Canada. I'll pass it over to Cathryn.
I don't know if protest is the right word. I use it as sharing information. And I guess I would say that why shouldn't people go out? Why shouldn't people have the opportunity to ask a question and have a conversation about it and have two viewpoints? I mean, whatever political party is at an event, they're there to share their information. And so for the people of Ontario, they should be able to ask a question and get an answer. So when they're voting with information from all the parties.
Okay, I guess this will be for each of you as well. Like, where's the line? Is it appropriate to? Would it be appropriate for someone to come and interrupt what you're doing here this morning? Should they speak to a leader or whoever they're voicing their displeasure with afterwards? Where does this go? That again gets to the point of being inappropriate during an election campaign.
The line is violence and hatred. For me, that's the line. Violence and hatred. And I have been to many events where people, they heckle, they express their dissatisfaction, and all of that, I think, is a part of our healthy democracy. But when it dissolves to violence and when it dissolves to hate speech, then that is just not tolerable, not acceptable.
Next question comes from Nusheen Ziafatzi from the Canadian Press.
Hey, Nusheen.
Hi, Andrea. I'm just going to pivot here to emissions reductions. Why are you proposing a new cap and trade system, and why not just enter a system with Quebec and California?
One of the things that was devastating is when Doug Ford decided when he got elected that he was going to start crusading against the environment. And you know that he scrapped cap and trade. You know that he pulled electric vehicle charging stations out of the ground, and he canceled all kinds of green energy projects that would have started to green our grid. Basically, he has driven us backwards when it comes to the environment, and now his solutions are building huge highways to mansions that nobody can afford, while paving over farmland and wetlands and conservation areas and cutting into the Holland Marsh, cutting into the Greenbelt, exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. What we need to do is ensure that Ontario is doing its part, and a cap and trade program will help us do that. It will generate the revenues necessary for us to green our energy system, to preserve or to put in place the kinds of programs that help us retrofit all of our buildings, change the way that we do land use planning, and protect the sacred lands that we know we all should be protecting. We have no choice. This isn't a matter of choice. It's a matter of determination, and it's a matter of Ontario solutions so that we can do our part to fight the climate emergency that is upon us. And all we have to do is look at what happened last weekend with the huge storm, or 10 days ago or so, to see the impacts that are going to continue to hit us and be very, very expensive. And we're going to see more loss of life, more loss of property, and we have an obligation to address the climate crisis that's in front of us.
And how long would a new system take to set up, and will it be in place quickly enough to meet your 2030 targets?
We're absolutely hopeful that it will, and as you know, we have a blueprint already in Ontario. Our cap and trade program is going to be a little bit different from the one that was in place before. We tried to get the Liberals to do the right thing and set aside 25% of cap and trade revenues to provide supports to those people who are going to have the harshest impacts. So whether that's northern communities, whether that is low-income people, whether that is First Nations folks, whether that is trade-exposed industries. Our climate plan, our Green New Democratic Deal, is a plan for climate, for justice, and for jobs.
Next question comes from Rob Ferguson from the Toronto Star.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, good to see you again. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. How about you?
Good. Thank you. Just wondered on Bill 124, how soon do you scrap it, and what's your plan for bargaining going forward? Inflation is pushing 7%. Are you going to open the coffers? Are you proposing any kind of catch-up for healthcare workers? How is that going to come together?
Absolutely great questions. The scrapping of Bill 24 will be one of the first pieces of legislation that we bring into the legislature. And what we will do is what governments should always do, which is engage in good faith, respectful bargaining with the people that do the work that keeps our province running, that creates the opportunities for the rest of us to live great lives here. And so we will make sure that kind of bargaining is a hallmark of an NDP government, because those are the values that I hold. And I want to say this, where we get into trouble is when governments, like the Liberals did, decided that the best way to manage the province was through austerity measures that brought us hallway medicine. And now the catch-up that Cathryn talked about is going to take time. It's going to take time because the former Liberal government eroded our capacity to take care of people in hospitals, in long-term care, in community care, in home care, in every setting. The Liberals eroded our capacity to do that care, to provide that care, that quality of care. And our staff, as you've seen, our frontline staff in healthcare are completely burnt out, and they're leaving in droves because of Bill 124. So Doug Ford came along, started cutting it in healthcare, put the wage cap in place, and people who are on those front lines are actually having cuts to their wages, cuts to their income over the last couple of years. We don't think that that's the right way to treat working people, and we certainly don't believe it's the right way to treat our frontline healthcare heroes.
Okay, switching gears, the Premier's headed to Windsor today. You were there, I guess, yesterday. The Liberal leader was there as well. It's looking pretty close down there, especially between you and the PCs in a couple of ridings. What's your message to voters down there as they make their choice?
We know that in Windsor there are a lot of auto workers, and the auto sector is extremely important in Windsor, but we also spent some time with nurses and frontline nurses yesterday as well. Why? Because both healthcare and decent jobs are a big part of what Windsor needs and what we are committing to Windsor. A very interesting thing happened yesterday, though, in our press conference when the issue around the auto sector came up, and our MPP Lisa Gretzky clearly outlined that Doug Ford has not been there for 4 years. He has not been there preparing Windsor to take advantage of the amazing skilled workers that exist in that region, the auto workers that have done so much work over the years, not only in their manufacturing plants, not only in the auto plants, but also as a union to fight for an electric vehicle strategy for Ontario. But the Liberals didn't have one. The Conservatives don't have one. But it was Unifor that took the leadership role there, and some of the local economic development folks, to try to bring that investment for the vehicles of the future to Windsor. And as Lisa Gretzky described it, everybody else was doing the work in Windsor. They were buying the food. They were cooking the meal. They were setting the table to get all of those investments to come to Windsor. And suddenly, at the end of everything, when all the work was done, Doug Ford showed up to belly up and eat. That's the description that Lisa talked about yesterday. In other words, Doug Ford hasn't lifted a finger. And we watched when GM was leaving Oshawa. Doug Ford put up the white flag and said, the ship has sailed. He has no concept of the importance of auto jobs. Now, you all know, I'm the daughter of an auto worker, so I understand what good jobs in the auto sector bring to our economy, how they lift families, how they create a great opportunity for middle-class Ontarians to build a great life here. A premier that simply walks away from auto jobs in Oshawa is not fit to be the premier of this province. A premier who ignores the automobiles of the future until the very last minute, when he has a political motivation to get engaged in an EV strategy and or the attraction of investment for the future of automobiles in our province. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not just about politics and power so you can make sure your big fish buddies are eating at the trough while the rest of us starve. It's not good enough to pretend at the last minute that you have a plan for good jobs in the auto sector, a plan for the future of auto workers in our province. At the last minute, for politically gratuitous motivation, that's not what Ontario deserves, and that's certainly not the kind of vision and proactivity that Ontario needs to make sure that our economy is on track. We can do that. I can do that. New Democrats can do that. Together, actually, we can do that. And we can do that on Thursday. So I'm looking forward to the kind of support that I need to make sure that we can take this province to the place that we need to go when it comes to EVs, including making sure that we have incentives for people to purchase those vehicles, including the grants that they need to provide the infrastructure in their own homes to plug in their electric vehicles. There is an entire strategy that we can have in place that saves those good auto jobs, that brings those investments to Ontario, and that also gets people out of gas-guzzling vehicles.
So we'll move to questions on Zoom. First question comes from Richard Southern from City News.
Ms. Horwath, good morning. We
Hi,
got
Richard.
the advanced polling numbers in from Elections Ontario, and more people did vote in the advanced polls than 4 years ago, 9.2% of eligible voters. However, the polls were open for twice as long this year as compared to 4 years ago, and we didn't see double the number of people voting. So there's a couple of ways to look at this, but I'm wondering what you think about this 9.9% of eligible voters voting in the advanced polls. You've been around campaigns for a long time. How do you take that?
Well, Richard, any way that we can make it more convenient for people to vote is a positive thing, and I think that the advance polls being open longer is a good way to get people engaged in the in the decisions around the future of our province. And when we see a premier that came to Ontario and started cutting immediately, a premier that's more interested in his big fish buddies and in his developer friends than he is in everyday working people, more concerned about big highways to mansions that nobody can afford. Well, people can't afford rent in cities like Toronto. People can't afford rent in communities around the province. Mr. Ford says nothing about those things. People know that there's a lot at stake in this election, and getting out to vote in the advance polls to make sure that your voice is heard is a spectacular thing. And I'm grateful that people are taking this election seriously.
Okay, I was interested in how you felt it might reflect on your campaign, but I want to follow up on something Charlie was asking you about. Do you really think it's okay that a protester storms the stage where Mr. Ford was speaking and gets within a foot of him? You seem to suggest you were okay with that. Are you really okay with that?
Richard, I have no idea about the detail that you're talking about, and that's not what I was talking about. What I was talking about is the right to have a voice and to make sure that we have the space for people to express their opinions in a democratic way. I also did say, and I think you heard what I said, that when it comes to violence and hate speech, those things are not acceptable.
Next question comes from Alan Hale from Queen's Park Today.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Alan.
We're expecting a gun legislation on the federal level today, and I was just wondering what is the NDP stance on gun restrictions? We have the Liberals talking about a handgun ban. What would you like to see happen in this bill?
Well, I have no idea what the federal Liberals are up to, and I don't know what's going to be in that legislation, and none of us do. But what I can tell you is that there is no room for handguns in public spaces. There's no room for handguns at Dundas Square. There's no room for handguns in a movie theater. In urban spaces, handguns just don't belong. Where families are, where people are, where communities gather, that is no place for a handgun. And we've been saying that for quite some time now.
So I presume that you don't agree with what has been happening to Jagmeet Singh at his appearances then.
As I said, it is fair game for people to have opinions. That's a democracy. A vibrant democracy relies on a sharing of ideas, even a conflict of ideas, a vibrant discussion about the future, about where we're headed, about what we're doing well and what we're not doing well when it comes to all orders of government. But when these things devolve into personal, hateful attacks, like what we've seen with Jagmeet, where there's vitriol and hate motivating the voices of some of these folks, where we see people on the brink of violence or violent behavior occurring, that's not acceptable. In fact, that erodes our democracy. That erodes our democracy. And so it's all of our responsibility to let people know that that is not acceptable, that is not a positive way of keeping our democracy vibrant. In fact, it does the opposite. It makes people unwilling to engage in elected office, and I think that will only hurt our ability to have a vibrant democracy.
Seeing no further questions, I'll turn it back to you, Andrea.
Thanks. I want to just wrap up by going back to the topic that we're talking about this morning when it comes to nurses, our frontline healthcare heroes, and the obligation that we all have to come together. As Cathryn said so eloquently and so clearly, we have to fix our healthcare system. And the only way to fix it is to stop the cuts. To stop the cuts. And together we can do that. We can stop the cuts. We can hire more nurses. We can bring those late career nurses online to help us with training and mentorship. We can scrap Bill 124. We can protect our public health care system. And as Cathryn said, Yes, it's about making sure that nurses have the kinds of positions that they deserve, have the ability to do the jobs that they want to do, that will keep us well, that will provide us with the health care that we need. But it's not just about them. It's about all of us. It's about our kids. It's about our mums and dads, our aunts and uncles. It's about the seniors that we now have in Ontario that are living a life without the kind of supports that they need and deserve, and whether that's home care, which we need to bring more of to Ontarians, or whether that's in long-term care, which we all saw was on its knees because of Liberal cuts, because of Ford cuts. We have an obligation to each other. Our public health care system is literally in our hands. That's what's at stake in this election. So please, please, think long and think hard about what your obligation is and what all of our obligations are to protect our public health care system, to start reinvesting in our public health care system so that all of us have the quality of care we need, provided by the good people like the ones behind me and so many others that are on the front lines of providing that care. Thanks so much, everybody.